Funding for this program was provided in part by the RE Synergy Foundation. Content for the Sustainable World.
My dad was an old-school surgeon who always wished he was a rancher, and a man who took life by the horns and ran with it. Think John Wayne meets Ernest Hemingway meets Teddy Roosevelt. One thing that always embarrassed me, though, was that if my dad saw something interesting wherever he was, he'd go ask about it. He'd start up impromptu conversations with perfect strangers about crop rotation, cattle genetics, or how to get all those pieces of firewood in the load to stay on top of that one little donkey. I was mortified as a kid. Well, I grew up, and now that's me. I married a perfect man with itchy feet who loves all things music and film and who makes documentaries just for the love of it. If you dump all of those things into a petri dish and let them stew for 25 years of blissful chaos, what do you get? Well, welcome to my life of vicarious agriculture. Come on along for the ride.
Craig Kolodge, or better known around here as Dr. K. I do actually have a doctorate in plant pathology from the University of California, Riverside. I was former farm advisor up in Santa Clara County for many years and county director, and ran the Bay Area Research and Extension Center before it went the way of condos, unfortunately. But been involved with agriculture better part of my career, both as a farm advisor and consultant.
And you did your PhD in El Centro, right?
I did my PhD in El Centro on vegetable crops and looking at the life cycle of parasitic roundworms that are the size of your eyelash and transparent to the naked eye, and yet can be extremely devastating if you don't understand how to manage the life cycle of that organism, what it likes to feed on, what it doesn't. That's what I did my dissertation on, to help the growers, particularly the carrot and lettuce growers down in El Centro along the border of California and Mexico.
So tell me this lovely big pile.
Yeah, this here is Mexican cocoa coir, medium grade. It is made and constructed from the husk of coconuts. So a coconut palm will produce the fruit, and inside that fruit is what you typically think of as a coconut shell with the coconut meat in it. But on the outside of that is a husk that they have to remove. It's very fibrous, as you can tell. And they will grind it up into different textures. This is called medium grade or general purpose. It's a little more coarse, but they'll also have very, very fine. They also even have stuff that's in chips, cocoa coir chips. So different growers will use it. This is used commonly in a hydroponic type of growing situation where they want to hold the plant up. It flows nicely, and then they will add the nutrients to the solution in the hydroponic mix. Believe it or not, cannabis growers like to use a lot of this.
Now this is great stuff because it is, some people use this instead of peat. Is that right?
Very good point. This is a renewable resource. We are getting it from the palms that you can plant. Peat is not. Peat is the result of, in many cases, thousands, if not millions of years of decomposition in swampy land up in Canada, northern Minnesota. And these peat bogs, once you harvest it, it's not like you can replant a peat plant to replenish that supply. So there's always been a concern, although the Canadians will tell you we just got plenty of it, you'll never run out of it. This is much more sustainable, is what we'd like to think, because it is renewable. And it's coming from Mexico, and their particular cocoa coir has a beneficial fungus affiliated that grows on the coconut coir.
But just this
that suppresses just this one.
Just the Mexican kind,
and
not
that's been documented by University of California in Riverside. And so the nurserymen love to incorporate this in because then it adds these beneficial disease suppressive fungi to the potting mix that allow them to grow without having to worry about Pythium, Phytophthora, and some Fusarium, some of these other root pathogens.
You're sort of a soil ecologist.
I'm more of a
Where
soil. I think best description of the disciplines, plant pathology, for anyone who gets a degree in it, there are 4 main disciplines. My focus was nematology, parasitic roundworms, but most nematodes, the most numerous multicellular animal on the planet Earth, are beneficial. So I didn't study the beneficial ones, I studied the ones that created damage to plants, tried to understand their life cycle. So you got nematodes, fungi, mycology, study of fungi, that was also a big emphasis at university, bacteria, bacterial diseases, and the 4th one is virus diseases, viral diseases. And if you want, you could add a 5th one, which is abiotic, non-living things like frost, smog. These things can also fall under the area of plant pathology, but aren't biological. So the 4 main disciplines that make up the field of plant pathology are nematology, mycology, bacteriology, and virology.
But they all work together, right?
They all work together.
It's not one thing.
It's never one thing. In the real world, it's a community of all of these organisms in different balances. And so you're always trying to balance what the plants that you're trying to grow want in the presence. The idea, for a long time, we thought we could eradicate all these pathogens. So the strategy was to attack the pathogens. Now what we're discovering is if you change the environment so that it's favorable to the plant and not to the pathogens, you control the disease. And that takes a little more effort and a lot more study. But we can oftentimes solve a problem simply by understanding how these organisms thrive, what they like, what they don't like, and what the crop you're growing prefers. And we try to shift the balance in favor of the plant at the expense of these. Honestly, I look at pathogens kind of like predators in nature. They challenge a plant. If a plant's environment is not conducive to health of the microbes and of the plant, then these pathogens take it out and recycle that energy.
Life on the edge of chaos, Michael
Yes.
Crichton would say, right?
Yes.
It needs a little impetus to evolve,
It
but
does.
too much and it can't survive.
Right.
Right? So you want to encourage that area right in the middle, right?
Right.
Because scorched earth does not always work. We have a tendency to
It
sometimes think, just
actually
kill the weed,
doesn't
right?
always work. It never really works because ultimately you end up creating, in trying to attack one organism in a community of thousands, you end up killing a lot of beneficials off. So better that you understand how to shift balances so that we can all coexist peacefully, even in the presence of a pathogen. So the pathogens may be there, but they're at such a low level, or they're they're what they call in a resistant phase. They're just surviving barely. And as long as you maintain that balance in favor of the plant, and some of the other organisms are keeping some of the pathogens in check.
So now,
So biodiversity becomes the name of the game.
is the name of the game. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get political, but I do want to ask you, people say sometimes science is under attack, but I think science is just plain underappreciated sometimes. People don't understand on a practical level what science and scientific studies do. So can you name just a couple of the things that science and pure research has helped us to understand in very practical things, like growing tomatoes and the cost of corn?
Well, one of the things people mistake about science in general is that science claims that they have the answers, and that's not true. Science is a process or an approach toward discovering the truth.
Socratic method, you search, right?
Yeah,
and
you are
argue.
searching and you are looking for what that system, and I always say system because very few things at all ever exist in a vacuum by themselves, isolated. So all organisms on this planet exist within communities in what they call an ecosystem of relationships. Dr. Elaine Ingham, a plant pathologist like myself, came up with the term called the soil food web, where you have an entire community of organisms in the soil coexisting, one feeding on another and cycling energy throughout that system that keeps our planet healthy and provides what the plants need. Understanding that complex network of organisms is extremely, extremely difficult. It's very complex, but we are getting better at it. We are starting to understand it better. Getting back to biodiversity in the soil food web, that's where the most active area of research is going on in soil science. That we are finally acknowledging that when we talk about soil health, the very use of the word health implies a living ecosystem. You can't apply health to something that's innate, like a metal drum like that trommel screen over there. You wouldn't say, gee, this table's healthy. You would say it's got good quality, but you wouldn't say it's healthy. So when we use the word soil health, what are we actually saying? What we're saying is that that soil is alive and in balance, and the microbes are coexisting and working in favor of what we're trying to produce, whether it's a tree crop, food, fiber, whatever. And we're trying to better understand all those relationships, and looking at different indications like the carbon-nitrogen ratio is an important one, because what people don't understand, these soil, I like to use the word livestock, just like we have the dairy over there, we have livestock that we have to feed. To have a healthy soil, you have to feed the soil livestock, and that's your bacteria, your fungi, your nematodes, your collembola, your protozoas, all of these microbes coexisting together to provide the plant what it needs. In fact, the tip of plant roots will actually exude chemicals out into their rhizosphere, the root zone in the soil, to grow their own microbes. Believe it or not, the plants themselves farm microbes at the very root tips to produce the nutrients that they need.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's actually, that's,
Just
and that's
phenomenal.
called rhizophagy, the feeding of the roots. And the plants themselves, we've discovered, produce and exude chemicals at their growing points that allow the microbes to flourish and provide the plant what it's looking for. So the plants themselves actually participate along with the microbes in giving the plant what it needs, and the plant in turn is giving the microbes what it needs.
Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the science part of
Yeah.
it. How long have we known that? Because we've known that nitrogen is good for the soil, right? In the 1800s, I forget when Haber-Bosch came
Yeah,
in, we figured,
yeah.
oh, we could just put nitrogen on
Yeah.
something, right? So
Synthesis,
then we
yeah.
learned about nitrogen importance, right?
Yeah.
But when did we start really? Was it only recently that we started refining about those
Actually,
root, the
it's
plants'
taken
role?
decades. It's been around. I mean, even when I was in graduate school back in the 1980s, right? Graduated in 1980, so 1970s. So that's 30, 40 years ago. We knew this was going on, but it was so complex, it was so much easier. We kind of took and we approached soil science and soil health from a more simplistic model. It was easier from a chemical and physics perspective. The biology itself, we acknowledged it exists, but it was so complicated, we didn't. A lot of people didn't want to go there.
We have a tendency to do that, don't we?
Very
The simplest
hard.
answer must be the right one, right?
Yeah. So we tended, but ever so slowly, soil scientists and microbiologists started to say, we got to pay attention. Something's going on here that we need to understand. And there became tools that we now have, DNA sequencing even. We can look at soils and we can determine the predominance of bacteria versus fungi just on the DNA analysis of the microbial community. So we have tools now that are allowing us to take a closer look. A good example is we were taught, and I'm sure you've heard that the way the soil stores carbon is in the form of humus. And the way you get humus out of soil, you bring it into a laboratory, you treat it with various chemicals, and you extract humic acids, fulvic and humic acids out of it. And then you can determine, well, what the humus content is of the soil. Well, what we found is when they went out in the field, without the laboratory environment, they could never find it. In fact, today the soil scientists, and I can give you the Natalie Ryle, a soil scientist at UC Merced, just did a presentation on the fact that carbon in the soil is not being stored in the form of humus, but it's being stored in the living matter, the microbes, both alive and dead.
That's what I want to know.
That's going on. So carbon being stored permanently in soil in the form of humus is no longer in vogue because they can't find it.
But
They can only find it in a laboratory, and it's kind of an extraction of a biological or a
synthetic
chemical
thing, yeah.
chemical
Yeah.
test that you can't directly attribute to a native, environmental field situation. We can't find it out there. We cannot find humus in actual native soil.
But carbon sequestration we have a tendency to think, okay, it's just something in the dirt. And I'm not a
Yeah.
scientist, but I
Right.
was reading on the tipping theory in the ocean is, the mass extinction events. And one of the theories is that all the carbon that gets stored below a certain level of the ocean, comes to the surface. And you go, what is carbon stored in the ocean? Every organism that dies goes to the
Called
bottom.
necromass.
Okay, I like that word.
Necromass, and there's a lot of research going on there, and they're finding that almost over 50% of the carbon is being stored in soil in the dead bodies
It's just,
of that community.
isn't that amazing?
Yeah, they don't have cemeteries like we do. When
comes
their
back,
cycle is over and they die, they stay there, and that's where the carbon is, and that's where the microbes will feed on that, and they'll recycle that energy, and the plants will extract a lot of that energy in the form that it needs, in a soluble form that the microbes make available to them.
But isn't that a beautiful thing in a way?
Yeah.
You think of
Oh, yeah.
energy is never lost, it's just transferred from one thing
It's
to another.
absolutely
Isn't that
true.
beautiful?
Yeah.
So you know what we look of as death and think, oh, that's a terrible thing. As long as we don't, shove formaldehyde in it and say we're going to preserve it forever, something else can use it, doesn't it? When
Yeah.
I'm gone 100 years from now, something will be living off of
Life
me.
is dynamic, and no matter how hard we try to stop it or slow it down, it's going to keep moving, and it moves in both the living and the dead life on the planet. And that's why even the move in 2026, I believe, in the state of California, it'll be legal to compost human remains, finally, because we're running out of room
Yeah.
to put concrete vaults and metal coffins and literally put people in the earth where they don't break down and return to the cycle
Yeah.
of life. So we finally come to the realization that there's a limit to what we've been doing, and we're going to now go and start working more with nature. And I think that really sums up even how we're going to be handling human remains in the future,
Yeah.
is we have to work with nature rather than counter to nature if we are going to continue to survive and sustain life on this planet.
But not just
Yeah.
that, philosophically, I love that idea
Yeah.
that when I'm gone,
Oh.
I mean, it takes a little bit to think, okay, mushrooms are going to take me over or something else of that nature, but I love thinking that something else lives on after me and through me.
I always tell my family I want to be my remains composted and plant a tree. What better memorial to my life on earth would be this beautiful tree growing from my remains versus a concrete slab of
Yeah.
granite, or a granite slab with my name chiseled
Yeah,
on it.
I'm right there
I'm
with
just
you.
going,
What kind of tree are you going to be? Do you want to be?
I haven't decided yet. I'll have to think about that. But I'm kind of partial to oaks. I love the old trees here in California, the living oak. It'd probably be something native.
Yeah.
I would think,
Yeah.
a native oak.
If you go to Colorado, you can be
Yeah.
cloned, right?
Yes.
I got made a science joke.
No, but it just makes sense to me. It just you're right. There's a transfer of life in a cycle of life that continues on well beyond our existence on this planet. But we get to participate in that wonderful dance of all this life for whatever period of time we're allowed here on this planet, and it's just extremely beautiful.
It's a lovely thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we are gonna. I know we're hitting the time when people are gonna start coming to you. You're a very popular man here.
Apparently.
So we're gonna hopefully do a series with you if we can twist your arm to do that particular thing, because there's more information in your brain.
There's some
and
more subjects we could cover.
oh,
yeah.
so I will definitely do that. But
We'll have to
I
get into the world of nematodes sometime. Here I'll tell you one interesting fact in nematology, because I almost did my dissertation on it, but I couldn't find a professor or anybody that was really qualified to tackle such a mystery, and that is nematodes have the ability in the desert to dry up and coexist in completely anhydrobiosis, called, in the lack of water. No metabolism measured, no moisture. They will dry up for decades with no moisture present.
It's not that little bear that we're
And
talking
then
about.
you add water, you take that soil, that looks like dead soil with nothing living in it, and you add some water to it, and what do you think comes out of that soil? These little roundworms will start looking around, hydrate, and look for food.
That should be a lesson to us, so that's a cautionary tale
It's called
as well.
cryptobiosis, the hidden life, and we don't know how they do it. But we know they can exist in the absence of water for decades, and all you need to do is reintroduce water to these organisms.
Sounds like an alien movie.
Yeah, they start to wiggle. And there was a concept when I was in school called spontaneous generation.
Yes.
They said the original life was spontaneous. Well, actually, the reason they believed that, because Leeuwenhoek, who invented the microscope, took some soil, or took some wheat grains that were infected by a nematode that was able to do this. It's called Anguina tritici, the wheat gall nematode. And they thought it was just something going on with the wheat, and they scraped these fibers into a drop of water under a microscope, and lo and behold, what looked like cotton fibers started to wiggle and move around. These were nematodes that had found a way to survive in a kernel of wheat and dry up and continue to exist until such time as moisture came in, they could find another active wheat plant to infect.
Like to see the look on his face when he saw that, huh?
So he looked at it and he said, well, gosh, this cotton fiber just became worms. Spontaneous generation. That's life comes from inanimate, non-living organisms. Well, actually, no, it was just an organism in a cryptobiotic or a hydrous state of lack of water, that all it needed was a drop of water and they became alive.
We are gonna do a whole segment with you on nematodes. I hope nematodes.
Yeah,
Do I say
yeah,
nematodes?
nematodes, yeah, they're eelworms in England. Yeah.
So if people want to learn more about this, now we are at San Pasqual Soils, right? San Pasqual Valley Soils.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, yes, San Pasqual Valley. People don't really. This is San Diego County.
This is the largest. We're standing on the largest agricultural preserve in the United States, owned by a city. The city of San Diego owns 14,000 acres of this valley to protect and have access to the water underneath the aquifer.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they bought it many, many decades ago, and that's why they don't allow any development in this valley. They allow the farms, and we have to monitor our wells and make sure we're not polluting the aquifers, but we're also able to pump that water out, feed our cattle, feed our forage crops and whatever, and that's the way the city would prefer it.
Yeah,
they want this to continue to stay in agriculture.
I did not know that. Okay, so what does San Pasqual Valley Soils do? You sell dirt. Is the easy way, but it's not the true way.
We started off in 2007. Okay, that's quite a while ago, 18 years ago. Just putting a pile of cow manure out there and saying, help yourself. And someone said, Rich Flammer of Hidden Resources, our consultant, who helped with the original permit, said, why don't you compost the manure and add value to it, and then you can make a little bit to support the dairy. So that was the start back in 2007. Eventually grew to us taking landscape waste. We don't take any food waste, we don't take any curbside. So our products are fairly clean of contaminants like plastics and glass and what have you. But we are the only remaining dairy left, and it wasn't for us recycling not only our dairy manure, but all the other organic material like landscape trimmings and what have you, that dairy would not be there. That we survive because we've been innovative. Frank Conine was innovative enough to understand that if he participated in the cycle of life, if you will, that he could continue to farm and produce dairy milk here in San Diego. So we're the last remaining dairy of what was once over 250 dairies. And we did it through offering environmental services. And one of the services obviously is composting it and adding value to the recycled organics and keeping them out of the landfill, where if they're buried, they produce methane, which heats the planet up.
Diversification of your business model saved you.
Yeah, diversification of the business model, and understanding that these organics are actually a life-giving, life-supporting resource that the farmers and the landscapers could use, and that would also help mitigate climate change. So we participate with the county in moving organics around at the parks and what have you throughout the county as a part of a bill called Senate Bill 1383, which says we're going to divert 75% of our organic material out of landfills to mitigate and minimize methane production and cool this planet down. So much of what we do is directly attributable not only to soil health, but to atmospheric health and to the planet's cooling efforts. So we do, I always say in many respects, we are an environmental services company, and that's how we're surviving.
Well, I have to tell you, this has been a lovely field trip. You can tell I'm in my dirt
you're in
moving
your right
clothes,
clothing.
and we're going to do a little bit of a lightning round with you on the things that you have. But I have to announce that you will be with us on the Claremont Garden Walk on May 3rd. Correct?
Yes, I will. There to answer questions. We're going to talk a little bit about some of our products, how you best use them. When you look at compost as the feedstock for livestock, then the form of compost you have, its feedstock, where it came from, how it was produced, becomes critical to how you use it. So I'm going to answer and share with people information and answer their questions on how to best use these products to do a vegetable garden, tree crops. You know, which product would be best if you have an orchard? How about if you want to grow tomatoes? Which product would be most appropriate? Each of these products has a purpose and a role to play in the soil food web, right?
Yes.
And so that's what we're going to share a little bit to get people to start realizing what they're participating in when they garden. And what I always say, when you garden, you can never really be alone, because you're communing with an entire ecosystem of living organisms that are giving you something, as long as you acknowledge that and feed them and take care of them.
I love that. I'm going to have to tell Rick,
you're
because
never
Rick
alone in a garden.
Well,
never.
Rick always tells me go dig in the dirt when I have a long day or I'm around, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting away from people and cars and all the rest of that kind of thing in the city, but I'm never alone. I'm with millions of organisms.
I still
right there, right?
remember reading an article about it. He was a journalist who had these tight timelines. You know, he had to meet the timeline in order to publish. And it would be so stressful, and he said the only thing that ever helped him, he would walk out his door of his house where he worked, and he would jam his hands in to the soil, and the energy from the soil would drain the stress out of him. It was like using his hands like a plug, and he would jam them into the soil, and he said that was the only thing that balanced him back and brought him down.
My husband's smiling over there behind the camera, because that's exactly me. Well, thank you so much. And we are going to come back and do a series with you if I can twist your arm for that one. But in the meantime, San Pasqual Valley Soils, if anybody wants to get compost and coconut
every
coir
second Saturday of the month, we have a free product giveaway of one of our composts. So every second Saturday from 6:30, we had one last weekend with our growers mulch. We had people lining up at 6:30 in the morning, filling up bags in that. If you self-load, we charge nothing for the material. If you want us to load a small trailer or a pickup truck, 2 yards roughly, we'll do that for $10 and take the work out of it for you.
pay the gas.
Yeah,
I mean, that doesn't even
yeah.
pay your gas on your. But
so-
that's lovely. And you actually do other events too. So April 27th, I want to say you're going to be at the Seed Exchange. It's on your social media for San Pasqual Valley Soils.
Right. Yep. I'll do that. We're going to also be at the Graze in the Fields with the Farm Bureau coming up in. I think that's also the end of this month or May. Maybe it's May. I always forget the dates.
Yep.
And there are other events. You can always get that information on our website.
On your website.
And I have a Dr. K's Corner blog there that I share information and presentations I've been given around the county.
And hopefully we're going to get more of that from you. So thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.